And so that's just a good appetizer. I think given that, you know what to expect about their discussion on Mahmoud Khalil. Here is this.
Losing their minds. Okay, which brings us to Mahmoud Khalil. So the audience, I think, knows my stance on this because I did a weekend podcast. If not, the short stance is I believe the government has every right to deport him, notwithstanding the fact that he's a green card holder and married to an American, which is really kind of an irrelevance legally. But the green card is not an irrelevance. And he's deportable under several different statutes. He's done a number of things that can get him deported. I think some of his speech is grounds enough, but he's actually behaved in a way that could get him deported. You can get deported for a lot of things, even when you're a green card holder. It's a privilege. It's not a right. And Trump had every right to say, you're out of here. And I know you disagree, and you think it's a First Amendment case, which I don't think. So explain why you think that and why you defend him in general.
Sure. I mean, first of all, I've been defending free speech as probably my most important value, not just as a journalist, but as a lawyer for 30 years. I remember being inspired by what the ACLU did in Skokie, Illinois, where they defended the right of American Nazi Party members to march through Skokie, which was a town of Holocaust survivors wearing Nazi uniforms, even though the lawyers who did that were Jewish lawyers and they had Jewish donors. It was a very overwhelmingly Jewish group, and they still defended the right of free speech of the people who are Nazis, who only 30 years before had tried to exterminate Jews from the earth, because I think the principle is so important. And I've seen many times people say they believe in the principle when it comes to their own allies, and then suddenly start finding ways to justify censorship by saying it's incitement or it's something else when it comes to the views they most disagree with. And I think that's what is important to recognize here is the Trump campaign, the Trump administration made very clear that they intend to go after and punish in a lot of ways people who are protesting the Israeli war in Gaza or Israel itself, because the Trump administration are strong supporters of Israel. So we have to recognize the people they're going after have views that the Trump administration vehemently disagrees with. In the case of Mahmoud Khalil specifically, I've heard a lot of accusations about him that he is a supporter of Hamas, that he engaged in intimidation of violence. There's no evidence of that. It is true that some of the protesters at Columbia engaged in bad acts, but you can't impute those to Mahmoud Khalil. And I don't know if you saw, there was Wall Street Journal reporting yesterday about who Khalil is. And a lot of the Jewish students at Columbia who are part of these encampments, part of these protests, and they did have a ton of American Jewish students as part of them, I've interviewed them, all stood up for Khalil and said, the reason he was the mediator between our group and the administration is because he's trusted by all sides. He has defended Jewish students before. If he hears an anti-Semitic claim, he'll denounce it. He's actually been at the Shabbat dinners that they were holding. I'd like to know specifically on the record what he has done that makes this claim that he's a Hamas supporter or incited harassment and violence against Jewish students justifiable, because I've looked very carefully and I don't see.
Listeners at home, think to yourself, predict the next few moments. Do you think Megyn Kelly is going to respond with specific instances, or do you think she's going to just leave it at that vague gesture to the New York Post? Let's watch.
Anything. He went on CNN and said
he works for
vision of
UNRA,
the world,
which is basically a branch of Hamas. That's one thing.
I had forgotten that's where she went. I had forgotten.
Yeah,
UNRWA, the United States Relief Works, agency, I believe, which is basically, like is the aid organization for Gaza.
Look, Matt, what she's talking about is a position that holds broad-based support. I mean, obviously, the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, agrees with her about this being a potential terrorist organization, as we talked about last week.
Right.
But no, I mean, obviously, it's a laughable and insane position. And again, let's just be very clear, talking about the slippage, talking about this danger to all of us. There are plenty of Americans who work for this organization, right? So saying that this is something that justifies deportation, only imagine what it is that they will think that justifies for American citizens. And I'm not saying that to even give any credence to her argument, but just know that this stuff is never isolated, right? It's an absurd position, but in taking these kind of more and more extreme positions, they chip away at like at a reasonable conversation so that they can say, oh, well, and this is what we're talking about, Carber, is that like there is this attempt now to sort of say, oh, well, this so-and-so is supporting terrorism. And you see how loosely they define that we're talking about a United Nations organization that hands out wheat, to people who need to make bread. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, let's hear a little bit more.
Megyn, the UNRWA was funded by the U.S. government for decades under both political parties. It's a part of the UN, and
but
I don't.
More recently,
I don't
it's been
agree
very
with that.
aligned with Hamas. You can't deny that.
Aligned with Hamas is in fact the exact same language they're using to detain Khalil, which is basically saying wanting what we want here. Like that, I mean, that's the other thing I want to actually zoom in on. So Glenn's speaking to a right-wing audience here, so you have to do that Skokie, Illinois thing, and that is true to Glenn's or origin story. He's been citing that since he's been talking in newspapers. But what's happening here is more perverse. Mahmoud Khalil is being persecuted for having the righteous position. He has done nothing wrong here. Nothing less than any one of us should want to do ourselves in standing up and trying to get large institutions that have a stake in what's happening to, again, hundreds of kids in the past week bombed. You can like just intense bombed. And all he did was mediate between the protesters and the authorities, and also work for UNRA, which is again a United Nations aid organization that importantly is considered by Zionists across parties as suspicious because feeding Palestinians is kind of suspicious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's trying to make the righteous seem unrighteous, which is, again, the second part of their argument here. Is like, one is that it's justified, and then like legally justified, allowable, and two is that, oh, this is also morally correct. When on both counts, the Trump administration and pigs like Megyn Kelly, are absolutely in the wrong.
We read some of Mahmoud's letter last week, I think, and it is, to the extent that we are able to retain enough civilization to continue the process of history and the practice of history, it sounds to me like letter to a Birmingham jail.
I totally agree with that characterization.
Like honestly, it gave me goosebumps. I can't believe his fortitude in this situation, which is still acute and alarmingly dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
That.
I mean, if you're going to say that people who go work for the UN are now suspect of being terrorists or whatever, you know how many
UNRWA,
employees of the UN are, and of UNRWA.
Even Joe Biden cut ties with UNRWA because it was working with Hamas.
And that is the real problem here. Like, yeah, I mean, I wanted to say how insane it is that she's just like, yeah, I do think it's so. But again, this is bipartisan.
Hamas post 10/7. Even the Democrats did that. This is not a partisan position.
Well, Israel is not a partisan position. Joe Biden fed Israel the arms and the money that they used to wage the war in Gaza. Joe Biden has long been one of the most stalwart supporters of Israel in all of Washington. Netanyahu has often said that.
I agree with that. But we're getting side.
That was fascinating, wasn't it? So like the sort of like eventually you have to get down to brass tacks here, which is that Glenn and Megyn Kelly do not agree about Gaza. But I imagine I think she just doesn't want to have that argument with Glenn about like Biden's support of Israel, right? But that's fascinating that she wants to move on.
It's because she's a sophist at the end of the day, and what she wants to do is to get some kind of crybaby lib to kind of lose their mind. And Glenn is somebody who she's not going to be able to get away with that tactic with him, right?
Yeah.
Used to wage the war in Gaza. Joe Biden has long been one of the most stalwart supporters of Israel in all of Washington. Netanyahu has often said that.
I agree with that. But we're getting sidetracked because even though the guy worked for UNRWA, which I do believe is working for Hamas, we can table that. We can put that to the side. I don't think there's any question this guy supports what Hamas did on 10/7. Any question whatsoever. He was also
where's your
wearing
evidence?
a shirt. First of all, he worked for UNRWA. Second of all, he referred to it as armed resistance, what the Palestinians did. He said that. It's on tape. That we aired it on the show on Saturday. That's not arms resistance. That's terrorism, what happened on 10/7. But you don't need any of that. I'll give away all that, what I just said.
Good.
Let's just look at what he did as the spokesperson for this group, Columbia University Apartheid, I can't remember the acronym, but it's,
Divest.
you know the group, CUAD, I think it was, Divest. And he served their spokesperson. That was the group that took over Hamilton Hall and engaged in the encampments on Columbia University. Hamilton Hall alone had so many crimes, we could spend all day talking about the number of crimes.
Was Khalil there?
And not that we know of. We don't believe he was there, but he was the chief negotiator. No, it matters. When you're the spokesperson, that's literally written into the immigration and the terrorism statutes. If you are the spokesperson for a group that espouses or supports terror, you're out. That's all they have to prove.
Sorry, terror. Now it's support. It's just like, I mean, this is literally like they tried this. It was less successful. Hopefully it was success. Right now there'll be a success. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is South Africa protests, similar sorts of tactics, occupations, that sort of thing. It was said, oh, this is an attack on whiteness. Everyone recognized that as fucking stupid, man.
Yeah.
Really stupid. Just like everyone should. But unfortunately, we can't because like a huge part of political leadership doesn't understand that criticizing Israel is not criticizing Jewish people.
I mean, look, water's wet, right? It is. Again, these are the things that are going on that are beyond even his case, right? Because when she starts saying, well, he was a spokesperson for a group that is espousing terrorism, she's talking about a whole lot of people, a whole lot of Americans, right? It is not only a wrong position, it is an extreme position. It is a position that is not targeted. It is not an exceptional moment. It is saying that we think, as we already talked about earlier with her, she's talking about El Salvador, ends justify the means. Let's eradicate our enemies at home and abroad. And that includes American citizens. I mean, this is a fanatic. This is a reactionary. This is an anti-democratic demagogue speaking here. And it's just no other way to put it. I mean, this is an extremist position.
And, I think let's put it a little bit more, but I kind of think this is a sign of extreme fear. That they're losing this.
Well, they are 100%. Yeah. And this is a point that Frantz Fanon made in The Wretched of the Earth. Frantz Fanon is like one of the great Pan-Africanists and revolutionaries. And he wrote in The Wretched of the Earth, I'm paraphrasing here, that comparing like his experience in Algeria, right, in a colonized country, and an American worker or a British worker or French worker. And he's sort of noting that like when the system is weaker, right, it has to become more and more naked, right? Ideology is sort of how everybody like under capitalism is sort of held down and held in service of these systems that are oppressing us all. Whereas when they're at their weakest, right, that's when the sword comes out, right? That's when the guns come out. The other extreme of that is when there is no part of that like hard state apparatus, right? That repressive apparatus. When it is just like, it's the flag, it's the things on TV, it's culture. Those are how you are sort of kept in line. That's when those kind of things are at their strongest. The ideology is at its strongest. And what you're seeing in America, particularly with Israel, is that everybody's seeing through this fucking bullshit. Everyone's seeing that everything that they've been told has been a lie. It's becoming more and more farcical. I mean, we're sitting here talking about, again, like an aid organization that gets like baby formula to people in need, saying that is a terrorist organization, right? That is an absurd position, and everybody saying it knows it as well as everybody hearing it. So you can't rely on that anymore. You can't rely on the accusations to shut people up. You got to be able to smash heads, deport people, and put them in prison.
It says something that Megyn Kelly has to, as her best response, cite senile ass Joe Biden, saying, well, Joe Biden said so too.
That guy everyone loves. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really great judge of everything.
Spokesperson is enough. And he was a spokesperson by every account that you hear of his behavior. He was going in there.
Not for terrorists, though.
Daily to speak with Columbia University administrators saying, this is what we need. You need to divest entirely from Israel or you're going to get more Hamilton Halls. That's it. That's all we need to deport him.
Also, okay, let me just say, this is quick.
Talking about like, you're going to get more Hamilton Halls. Right? It's like, oh, some fucking kids are gonna sit in the in this building and not leave. Like, I'm not even trying to say that to demean them or anything like that, but it's like, what are you talking about here? Oh, this like thread of like, you know, because it acts as if the implication here is, well, you have to talk about it in that way, is to try to imply, or at least to make it sound scarier, right? Than it is. Like, oh yeah, so people are gonna hang out inside of a building.
The only but worst thing that happened there was a police sergeant accidentally fired his gun.
Their gun off. It was the NYPD
dumbass cops.
They also found a bike lock.
Inside
of it. I mean, they had to fabricate this absurd story.
It was almost a horrific Peggle accident.
Important about what these protests were in general and what the one at Columbia was, because I've interviewed a lot of Columbia students who participated and even organized these protests.
Oh, this is good too. This is good. Megyn Kelly is going to explain to Glenn what real Jews are.
Okay, let me just say, this is so important about what these protests were in general and what the one at Columbia was, because I've interviewed a lot of Columbia students who participated and even organized these protests. Once again, many of whom are Jewish, many of whom are American Jews. There's tons of American Jews who were vehemently opposed to the Israeli war in Gaza and who went out and protested against it.
But a lot of the ones who show up are like Jewish Voices for Peace, which is as Hamas supporting.
They count.
As Hamas is.
They count. They still count as being Jewish. And
let's not pretend that they represent the dominant Jewish voice on the issue of 10/7.
No, but they represent a significant minority. They had Shabbat dinners inside the encampment at Columbia because of how many Jewish students were there. And Khalil would go. Here's what the Wall Street Journal said. Khalil is someone who would even step in front of an aggressor to protect Jewish students and who is a believer in nonviolence. And here's what an American Jewish woman at Columbia said. I can state with full confidence that Mahmoud has never expressed support for Hamas. And she said she's an American Jewish woman who believes in the importance of Israel as a Jewish homeland, and talked about how often he would attend the Shabbat dinner inside the encampment. I think, like, let me just use January 6th for a minute.
Glenn, you're talking like inside the encampment. So yes, he would go and participate in this probably Jewish Voices for Peace Shabbat dinner, which again, they're hard partisan Hamas supporters. While this group that he was affiliated with was stopping Jews from attending the buildings they wanted to attend, crossing campus when they wanted to.
I actually haven't watched this far to see how Glenn responds to this. But again, this is the canard that they had a no Jew zone, which is just such an offensive lie. The reality is they had a perimeter that they didn't want instigators, Zionists, to put a name on it, which had a habit of going in, trying to pick fights for cameras that would justify a state response that could clear them out. Does that sound familiar? And so that's what was happening. There was not the idea that there's some widespread bigotry towards Jews is obvious a lie. And that's why Megyn Kelly's so uncomfortable when Glenn keeps citing Jewish Voices for Peace, because it's true. Disproportionate number of those protesters, which is to say a higher than the population of Jews at Columbia, are in those protest groups. And it is it's unbelievable how comfortable people like Megyn Kelly are to just fucking dismiss them.
Yeah.
It's sickening.
Again, getting to like the thing I've been, I know, repeating myself over and over again, but you just notice how quickly these kind of things are set up to expand, right? When it's like, oh, yeah, you're not Jewish because you have the wrong position. You're not American because you have the wrong position, right? You support terrorism because you're protesting this or that. I mean, these are slippery on purpose, and these, yeah, like you just need to recognize what's going on here because it doesn't stop here.
And good for Glenn here.
Cross campus, professors too. Like, I'm sure I'm super glad he had Shabbat dinner while he was stopped.
Also, I don't know, what was Megyn Kelly's position on safe spaces? If she's talking about I can't do work because a righteous protest is happening outside.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's pretty instructive in the right attitude. You should be open to it.
Professors too. Like, I'm sure I'm super glad he had Shabbat dinner while he was stopping Jews from exercising their rights on the campus.
You have no proof that he was ever stopping Jews from. Okay.
Seated.
So that means, like, what I've spent 2 or 3 years arguing with liberals by arguing that they had wildly overstated what January 6th was and had unjustly prosecuted the people who were there, especially the ones who never engaged in violence. And what they would tell me is, what do you mean? Here are the people who are beating police officers. This was not a nonviolent protest. And I would say, okay, well, punish the people who used violence against the police officers, but you can't impute that to the entire protest.
You can.
No, you're taking the
100%
worst
can when
acts.
you're talking about terror and immigration. No, we're talking about apples and oranges. That's a very different thing. You can't charge somebody with crime by like thought or by affiliation.
Literally, you have said that one of the crimes here is that he supports Hamas, right? Which is a thought, something that you think in your head. Insane. I mean,
I think she literally just admits here that yes, you can prosecute for thought crimes if it's terrorism. And I mean, damn. Let's just get this clean.
Immigration. No, we're talking about apples and oranges. That's a very different thing. You can't charge somebody with crime by like thought or by affiliation unless it's an actual conspiracy. But we don't have to prove that he committed a crime. We don't have to prove that. Although I believe he probably did. If he's the spokesperson for this group, then you could allege extortion. You could allege conspiracy. Now, Alvin Bragg is unlikely to do that, but that doesn't mean crimes haven't been committed by this guy. We'll have to see where the evidence goes. They're looking into that right now, including the DOJ. But you don't have to prove a crime. It's enough that he did it. If he did these things, if he acted as a spokesperson for this group that did commit crimes on the campus of Columbia, he's out. You can get him out under numerous provisions under immigration law for criminality, for supporting terror, for espousing terror, and then ultimately for the Marco Rubio Secretary of State thing that says if you're a threat to foreign policy, you're gone. You don't have to prove anything other than Marco Rubio reasonably believes that.
The Bill of Rights still restricts what Marco Rubio can do, even though he's the Secretary of State. The Bill of Rights applies to green card holders. The Supreme Court has said that for 120 years. And if Joe Biden had said, I'm deporting Jordan Peterson because he's expressing a lot of dissent to my views and participating in protest against our policy, and I deem him a threat to foreign policy, every conservative in the country would have said that is a threat to the Constitution to do.
It has to be reasonable.
Again, like, that's a very good analogy because 2 degrees of connection. Charlie Kirk's turning point action, I believe that's what it was, one of his turning point cutouts, sent buses of people for that protest. Jordan Peterson works very closely with Charlie Kirk. Bing, bang, boom, you're deported, buddy.
Yeah.
Biden could, like, with this power, it's the exact, that's a pretty one-to-one analogy. And here's the thing, we wouldn't be supporting that. Like, David and I would not want to see that. Like, that's insane. That would be it's funny to joke about, I will admit. I joke about deporting Crowder and people like that all the time, but that's mainly because Trump is putting deportation into the fucking zeitgeist. But yeah, I mean, that's a good analogy. Let's just take a little bit more. I know we've been playing this a while.
thing here is
has to be reasonable.
But
there's nothing unreasonable about saying being the spokesperson for an on-campus terror group means you've
on campus. I can't. Okay, sorry.
violated your terms of staying here, and your green card is getting revoked.
I think you're wildly mischaracterizing the point of this protest. I remember, very well in 2002, people who were opposed to the U.S. invasion of Iraq were told, oh, they were Saddam Hussein supporters, and they would say, no, we're not Saddam Hussein supporters. We just don't think the U.S. should invade Iraq. Same thing now. If you don't support financing Ukraine, you're told, oh, you're a Putin supporter, and you say, no, I'm not a Putin supporter. I just don't want the U.S. involved in this war.
That's a straw man.
These protests were about Megyn, because these protests were against
no one
the
who was
Israeli
out on the
war
streets.
in Gaza. They were not defending Hamas.
They were demanding that Colombia divest. They were demanding that Colombia.
Exactly, but that's not a Hamas. That doesn't mean that you. No, that's
in the Constitution that we have to fucking give money to Israel. I mean, maybe if you get your way, maybe if your folks get your way, it will say that soon. But as long as I have something to say about it, as long as millions of us who are saying no to your bullshit have something to say to it, fuck you with this kind of thing that's saying, oh, we don't want to send money to Israel is terrorism. That is an insane position. I mean, that's even more insane than the other implications that, like, oh, maybe somebody, had sympathy for Hamas, which is ridiculous on its face. There's, you can have sympathy with whatever you want, right? That's like between you and God, frankly. But to say they don't want they do not want a private organization, Colombia, to give money to Israel is terrorism. Are you serious? I mean, that is as fanatical a statement as you can get. And I want these people to just own that kind of shit, right? Because again, they use words like terrorism. They start saying Hamilton Hall as if it's just like some tragic event instead of something where like young people got into a building and said, hey, we're protesting here. And now saying that, you have to. Not only do you have to be loyal to Israel, not only can you not criticize Israel, if you start having a problem with how much money is leaving this country and going to Israel, that's terrorism.
If you follow the exact same demands of the people who protested apartheid South Africa, another apartheid state, that's terrorism. I mean, everyone should be able to understand this as hysteria. And I mean, I can't stop watching this.
The anti-Israel protesters modeled themselves after the student movements in the 1980s that were against the apartheid regime, the main demand of which was, we demand that you divest from apartheid South Africa. Okay. That's what these students are demanding, that we demand. That is a peaceful protest, not a violent one.
The American students cannot be deported for having done that, but someone here on a green card can be.
And if also, they had, be very clear, Trump is not. I know, if you're saying what's going on is supporting terrorism, right? Like all of these things you're using to justify this blatantly clear illegal action by the Trump administration, right? And you're saying, oh, it's clear as day, he's engaged in terrorism. Well, there are plenty of things that can be done to American students and American citizens under that banner. Like you can't have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways where you say, oh, this is perfectly justified because he's doing terrorism. And then, oh yeah, but don't worry about it. There's no free speech implications. There's no worry that you should have about this because obviously I don't truly believe that because it's fucking bullshit. Right. I mean, it is the activity of a liar and a crook.
It's fascinating to hear when Megyn Kelly feels the need to interrupt Glenn, and I just want to get this moment again when Glenn really starts cooking and she doesn't want to contradict him.
The apartheid regime, the main demand of which was, we demand that you divest from apartheid South Africa. Okay. That's what these students are demanding, that we demand. That is a peaceful protest, not a violent one.
Ding, ding.
The American students cannot be deported for having done that, but someone here on a green card can be.
Can they be charged for terrorism, Megyn Kelly? Like, forget deportation. Can they be held for supporting terrorism, for aligning with terrorism under Marco Rubio's, powers?
Well, if they had, she'll get away because she somehow has some ability to sort of see what is in people's hearts and minds, because she wants to institute a regime of thought crime in this country, right?
This is her. Yeah, this is her. Spelling it out.
Trump is not running around trying to deport people who protested on behalf of the Palestinians in Dearborn, Michigan, without committing crimes. He is not doing that.
Not yet.
The reason this guy, and he's not going to, Glenn, let's be honest.
Oh, please.
The reason this guy got caught.
This is a week old. Multiple students are being caught up in this Dragnet. Immediate, which should have never been made, that prediction, but immediately stupid prediction.
The crosshairs is because they unleashed hell on that Columbia campus. They behaved criminally. His group, of which he was a spokesman, whom he was defending and making demands on behalf of in dealing with the university daily. That's why he's getting deported, not because he's pro-Palestinian.
I'm having trouble about this issue of, is criminality necessary? You keep accusing him of committing a crime. Megyn, hundreds of Columbia students, hundreds, maybe thousands, were arrested throughout 2024 when the administration would call the NYPD on them. Khalil was never even arrested as part of those protests because he was never one of the aggressors. He was the mediator. He was somebody that the administration trusted, that the protesters trusted to try and bridge and de-escalate. That was his role. To try and depict him as a Hamas supporter, that is...
You said... Yeah, no, he does look like a Hamas supporter to me. Of that, I have very little doubt. But
I
don't
agree.
have to
He
prove
does
that.
look. That's the thing. He looks like a Hamas supporter to you, but that doesn't make him one. A lot of people look like things
I'm not talking
that
about
they're
his
not.
appearance. I'm talking about the.
Oh, she walked into that.
I think we can leave it there.
Yeah, that was good. Good on Glenn. That was a good showing for sure.
And I'll be honest, I was ready to be disappointed in. Absolutely great job, Glenn. I was ready to be disappointed in Matt Taibbi, who I saw was just on Megyn Kelly's program on a similar topic, and talk about deportations. I don't know if it was Khalil or if it was Venezuela, and his podcasting buddy Walter Curran, I thought, had a pretty heinous position on it. But Taibbi, he did his whole, well, Democrats discredited themselves on civil liberties, so what can they say anything? But he did get a little bit of, I'm a little bit worried about the trajectory of Trump's actions here. So it's good, I guess, because the thing is I wish it didn't need to be done. Megyn Kelly does fucking numbers, man. So many people watch her shit that you got to take the opportunity. And Glenn is a competent messenger on this sort of stuff.